With the massive success of so many games nowadays, it's really no secret why we get so many sequels and spin-offs. But unfortunately, some of these sequels definitely don't manage to live up to the expectations set by their predecessors. Welcome to Trending 10, and today we're going to be counting down our picks for the top 10 worst video game sequels of all time. Now, of course, for this list, we're going to be looking at games that directly followed up on another game. Spin-offs and reboots will not be included in this list, so you're safe this time, Sonic 06. This time. Ready? Let's go ahead and get started. Number 10. Final Fantasy XIV. The original Final Fantasy XIV. One of the most legendary franchises in the history of video gaming is Final Fantasy, which has been running for over 30 years. While just about every Final Fantasy player you meet has a different opinion of which is the best entry, just about all Final Fantasy fans agree that 14 is definitely one of the worst. Like Final Fantasy XI, Final Fantasy XIV was an MMORPG rather than just a straightforward RPG, allowing players to interact with each other along their journey. Released in 2010 after 5 years of development, Final Fantasy XIV was ripped apart by critics and gamers alike for its terrible interface, sloppy gameplay, and for the whole thing being blatantly unfinished. Due to backlash, the servers were shut down after just 2 years, and the PlayStation 3 port was ultimately cancelled. In fact, Final Fantasy XIV was so poorly received that Square Enix made a direct sequel, a reimagining of 14 titled Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn, in order to try and fix the mistakes of the original. And thankfully, they succeeded in spades. Number 9. Epic Mickey 2: The Power of Two. Epic Mickey is a very interesting case for a video game. The first game was released for the Wii in 2010 and tasked Mickey Mouse with fixing the damaged world of the wizard Yin Sid. It was intended to show off that Mickey wasn't just for kids, as the gameplay was much more complex than what you would expect from a Mickey game, and the story and environments were surprisingly dark and mature. It received solid reviews and sold well enough to greenlight a sequel, Epic Mickey 2: The Power of Two, which featured co-op gameplay allowing players to control both Mickey Mouse and Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Unfortunately, Epic Mickey 2 was met with mostly negative reviews, mainly due to it not fixing the issues present in the original game and the gameplay feeling overall repetitive and stale after just a few levels. In fact, it was so heavily criticized that it barely sold a quarter of what the original did, causing the planned sequel to be cancelled and the development studio to close down. Number 8. Banjo-Kazooie: Nuts and Bolts. One of the most legendary and influential game franchises in the world is of course Banjo-Kazooie. The first game was released for the Nintendo 64 in 1998 to critical acclaim, and the sequel, Banjo-Tooie, was released 2 years later to similar reception, with many gamers even considering it to be even better than the first. Naturally, players were excited to see what developers Rareware had in store for Banjo 3. However, Banjo 3's development was suddenly halted without explanation in 2002, which many of course believe was due to Rareware being bought by Microsoft. But a few years later, we got a teaser for a next-gen Banjo game, and we thought, man, could it be? Was Banjo 3 finally coming back? Well, unfortunately, that wasn't going to be the case. What we ended up getting was Banjo-Kazooie: Nuts and Bolts, a car-based adventure game. Apparently, the game started as a remake of the original Banjo game, but eventually changed to a car construction game due to the developers being influenced by Legos. No, seriously, that's the story there. The developers were influenced by Lego cars and decided to turn a Banjo-Kazooie remake into a car construction game. It was released to mostly mixed reception from critics, but almost universally negative reception from gamers, many of whom felt like they had been cheated out of a proper Banjo 3 for a strange Lego-inspired car game and felt it had no place in the Banjo universe. How did you feel about Nuts and Bolts? Number 7. Star Wars: The Force Unleashed 2. The first Force Unleashed game was pretty fun, telling the story of Darth Vader's secret apprentice during the Purge of the Jedi in between episodes 3 and 4. It was fun, giving you full control of the Force and allowing you to decide if you wanted to lean towards the dark side or the light. The sequel, however, was reduced to nothing more than a somewhat sloppy hack and slash with a Star Wars paint job put over it. Sure, some of the special moves looked cool and some of the environments were pretty, but you got pretty bored of them real quick thanks to the repetitive gameplay and much more linear approach. The Force Unleashed 2 was panned by critics and gamers alike, and managed to get the third planned game cancelled. Perhaps that's a good thing though. Number 6. Devil May Cry 2. One of the most classic and beloved hack-and-slash games ever is Devil May Cry. Released in 2001, Devil May Cry puts you into the shoes of Dante, a demon hunter with a vendetta against the creatures of darkness after his brother and mother were murdered. Naturally, following the success of the original, a sequel was soon to follow. Devil May Cry 2 was released in 2003 and follows Dante once again as he attempts to stop the demon Argisax from rising. However, the sequel was significantly different from the first game, thanks to the sloppier controls and much lower difficulty, as well as muddier graphics and a drastic change in Dante's personality. Despite being a massive disappointment, however, Devil May Cry 2 still sold extremely well. Number 5. Resident Evil 6. Man, here's a franchise that has been all over the place within its lifespan. The series started off as a fixed camera horror classic, then switched things up to third person for RE4, one of the greatest horror games ever by the way, and then switched again to a more action-oriented gameplay style for Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6. Now, you may have issues with RE5, but chances are if you hated it, you probably really hated RE6, which managed to take the few solid elements from Resident Evil 5 and rip all of the fun right out of them. Resident Evil 6 tried to please both the horror fans and action fans with multiple campaigns, each focusing on a different style of play. But what we ended up getting was an awful game that really didn't do either style correctly. Thankfully, Resident Evil 7 has gotten the series right back on track. Number 4. Tarak Evolution. Tarak is awesome. What other games let you run around and shoot your friends while shooting dinosaurs? What about running around shooting your friends while riding and shooting dinosaurs? The original Tarak games are classics, with Tarak 2 Seeds of Evil being the standout. But during the end of its lifespan, the series definitely struggled. Tarak Evolution was released in 2002 and was the first game in the series to not be released on the Nintendo 64. While this Tarak title did feature the series' trademark ultra-violence and high energy, just about every technical aspect of the game was criticized. Poor AI programming, subpar graphics, awkward sound issues, and very low frame rates. The game's main antagonist, Tobias Bruckner, even had an annual award ceremony named after him by Electronic Gaming Monthly, who began hosting the Tobias Bruckner Memorial Awards, which featured all of the worst games of the year. Not exactly what you want your game's main villain to be remembered for. Number 3. Duke Nukem Forever. Oh dear, what can be said about this game that hasn't been said before? Well, nothing really. Famously in development for over 15 years, Duke Nukem Forever was destroyed upon release by critics and gamers for its ridiculous load times, bad graphics, lame gameplay, sloppy movement, unfunny jokes, tasteless story, and well, I guess you get the idea. This game sucks. Originally intended for release on the Nintendo 64 as a sequel to Duke Nukem 3D, internal conflicts caused it to be pushed back time and time again. Finally getting a release for the 7th generation of consoles in 2011, where it was received as one of the worst games ever created. Yeah, unless you're looking for a laugh at just how bad it is, don't play this game. Number 2. Steel Battalion Heavy Armor. Steel Battalion has gone down in gaming history thanks to its massive and iconic controller, which quickly became a collectible. So what happens when you take a huge controller and try to squish all of its capabilities into the Xbox 360 Kinect? Well, Steel Battalion Heavy Armor happens. Developed by Capcom, this game was meant to bring the Steel Battalion series back into the spotlight while simultaneously showing off the technical abilities of the Microsoft Kinect. Unfortunately, the Kinect was famously lame and nonsensical, leading to just about every game that was released for it being just as lame, if not even lamer, with Steel Battalion often being called the worst of the bunch. With horrific controls and some of the glitchiest gameplay ever seen, it's virtually impossible to do anything right in this game. It's honestly a mystery how this game wasn't cancelled in development. And finally, number 1. PacMan 2: The New Adventures. Yeah, you heard me. PacMan 2, a direct sequel to the arcade classic. We're not sure whose idea it was to make a sequel to PacMan, let alone make it a side-scrolling point-and-click adventure hybrid, but it was a bad idea. Released in 1994 for the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, PacMan 2: The New Adventures is one of the weirdest games ever made. You have to go around and solve puzzles while managing Pac-Man's mood and keeping him happy while he's being harassed by the ghosts from the first game. If you still have a Wii U, this game was ported to the digital marketplace, so you can go and check it out if you want, but it's definitely not going to be any fun for you. But alright guys, that's it for today's list of the 10 worst video game sequels of all time. Know of any other terrible game sequels? Be sure to let us know down in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to drop a like and subscribe for more great content. But alright, that's going to be it for this one guys. Thanks so much for watching Trending 10, your guide to what's viral right now.